Hello and welcome. My name is Tim. Welcome to Digital Signage Explore from Signage Live. We are lucky enough to have an interview here with Mark Coxon. Mark, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me this morning. Appreciate it.
You are Director of Strategy and Markets at XCG and contributing editor at Rave. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
How long have you been at AVI SPL?
So AVI SPL, it's been about 3.5 years that I've been with the XTG group.
Hmm.
The XTG group within AVI SPL, it's our experience technology group. It's only about 4 years old in formality, but
Mm.
obviously there's a history of doing these type of projects within the company. It was just organized in a different way about 4 years ago to really create a methodology and concentrate some talent behind the experiential projects group.
And you just recently, you've been submitted for award, right? You just mentioned that just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, the AV Awards finalists came out today. So I saw that our SeaWorld Jewels of the Sea project was nominated for Entertainment Project of the Year. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and see what happens in London later.
Absolutely. Congratulations and all the best. And I hope you win that one.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It was an exciting project. It's cool to see it be nominated.
I think it's a good jumping off point because we typically, we chatted before this and just kind of understanding what might be a good subject to cover. And we kind of started talking a little bit more around psychology and the human kind of experiences when it comes to these things. This is probably a really good example of that, right? In terms of what the thought processes of installing something like this.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about what is going to stop people and what is going to motivate them. Like, depending on the outcome that somebody's trying to get, this project has some real immersive LED and some ambient audio, et cetera, and really creates this space where when you come in, you're enveloped in content, but it's not for content's sake. The content actually lives around these portals into tanks where you have the real fish, the real jellyfish, which are the stars of the show.
Hmm.
Obviously, you go to SeaWorld not to look at a screen. You go to SeaWorld to see the animals, right? To see the
Right.
wildlife, to see the biology. And so being able to use something that augments that and then create this kind of bespoke environment where you have LED water falling overhead and you may have jellyfish kind of swimming through space. But it's really not meant to be a spectacle in the way that you just stand there and watch it. It's more of one of those kind of pieces of content that can be very calming and actually help you tunnel in to reading about the fish, to learning more, to kind of create some of that rest and digest state that's important for people to be able to absorb information. So it's a really great project in that way. And that's why I think we're so proud of it. And, kudos to the people at SeaWorld who envisioned this and really had a strong vision for what they wanted to do in this gallery because they didn't want to make it just about the media. They wanted to make it about the animals, and the animals are the star of the show in there.
But this must have kind of scratched a few itches for you because you also have a history with animals, right? In terms of your prior experience that we talked about.
Oh yeah. So being a formal zoology, major in college, thinking I was going to work for the game and fish department or as a vet and a large animal vet in a zoo was one of my aspirational goals when I was a kid. Yeah, anytime I get to do something with a zoo or an aquarium or connect dots, even in natural history museums, things of those spaces, for me
Mm.
personally, just because they're things I geek out on as an individual, they really do scratch that itch, right? Like, wait, I'm part of their world right now, for this one project. At least I'm part of the world that I thought I was always going to live in. So it was
That's
amazing
really
to be
cool.
part of it. Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, how often does that come up, right? It's not like every week you get to combine three different passions together and go, "This is exactly what I need."
Yeah, like I joke that like in another life, it would have been cool to be Jeff Corwin or Jack Hanna or Joan Embry or one of these folks that were out there being influential in helping with conservation and
Mm.
introducing people to different species and animals and being kind of the face of a zoo or a conservation program. So to be able to be involved in this way where you're really igniting, the point of it is to ignite the passion and the curiosity in the customer or
Mhm.
the visitor to the exhibit, right? So how do you make a kid who walks into a gallery leave wanting to be a marine biologist? And that's the part that's really exciting, right? Like, how do you ignite a passion maybe somebody didn't know they have, and someone leaves completely changed? So, for me, that's what I love about the work that we do. I think AV has this real power to move hearts and minds and not just create an Instagrammable moment that's here and gone, but really
Mm.
create some lasting impact on the people that visit some of those experiences.
Well, I think that's something that I've noticed as well, specifically from a digital signage perspective. A lot is changing in the past 3 or 4 years where experiential has become kind of the key word that everyone wants to use. I think before we had digital signage was how do we replace posters but keep them, able to update them remotely? Whereas
Yeah.
now it's more like how do we infuse the tech side of things into a holistic experience where actually the tech isn't the forefront of the story. It's more like it's backing up whatever it is that you're seeing in that particular location seems to be more and more the driving factor.
Yeah, so I think there are two things that happen there, right? There's one is that how are we creating a unique place-based experience that we're not just recreating our website or recreating an experience that somebody could get fully online just through a screen in a
Mm,
venue because very few people are going to stop at a screen and look at your content if it's the same content that they can get on their phone and it's the same content that they can look at on their laptop screen.
right.
Why are they going to digest it then and there? You don't have a captive audience anymore. There are only a very few places, some transportation hubs, et cetera, you get a chance for a captive audience, right? If somebody's pulling their suitcase through an airport on a people mover and there's an LED to the side, you do have a chance to
Mm,
get somebody. If you're coming down an escalator and it's on the hero wall right in front as you come down into a space, you have that chance, right? So you have these places where people probably aren't in their screens because they're moving and it's dangerous to be looking down the whole time, et cetera, although some do, we know.
mhm,
But there are some places that we have a chance like that. But just idle time, somebody sitting in a lobby, somebody sitting outside your building, no longer is the bright, flashy light the only option for entertainment in that space. They
mm.
can curate whatever they want on their personal device. And so it raises the bar for how we get attention and how compelling something needs to be if we're competing with a very personal device in the pocket. So I think there's that portion of it. And then I think the other part of it is how are we connecting to the whole human, to the human needs of not just sharing information, but creating some sense of discovery, creating some sense of social connection, creating some sense of aspirational mission. Like
Mm.
all of those things are modes that people are operating in as they walk around the world. And so like content needs to go beyond, your quick hit marketing pitch and really resonate on another level in order for somebody to stick and watch it.
So that's definitely something we're seeing as well, is just that kind of changing the mantra of why you're doing something. And I think texture comes in a lot more now, where it used to just be you put a screen on the wall, the screen's there. But now there's
Yep.
a lot more thought of what else exists around that screen to envelop it into the experience and make it feel more natural. In your kind of experience when you're going to these prospect cases that you want to go and talk about, how early into that discovery journey does the human condition or the human experience come into play? Is it the first port of call with the subject, or do you tend to be driven tech first? Which one takes priority?
Um, Obviously, the answer of when someone should be engaged is always at the beginning, but the reality is that technology is often left to the end, and we don't get access to some of those conversations, right? So, if you think about just any normal project, if you think about the way that architecture works, right? There's always a programming phase, and it's funny. I was writing something about in AV, programming is the last thing we do, and it's the code that we put into a system. Architecture programming is the first thing you do, and it's determining what the outcomes of the project are and how we're going to accomplish those. And then the building takes shape around those programming notes. So you design around that human experience and those outcomes that you're trying to deliver. And so I always think it's funny that the difference between those two things, because the screen that someone looks at or the workplace technology experience they have, that's the first touch of the people that are using the space. That's
Mm,
what they see when they walk in. That's the visible layer that they see. But it's the last thing that we typically start to tackle. Like content usually comes towards the end. And many times content's coming after technology's already been picked, which is even
right.
a bigger sin to me, right? We should know what we're trying to play back before we decide what we're playing it back on.
Mm,
And we should also know what people are trying to accomplish before we create the thing that we're playing back in the first place. So the ability to back up. Many times I'm talking to IT departments and I'm like, we should be talking to corporate communications. This is an employee experience, initiative. It's going to have a technical execution, hardware, software, CMS, et cetera.
sure.
But the project is a human-centered communication project. So why aren't the people who want to communicate with the humans in your organization in this room right now telling us what their goals are, what kind of things they're going to want to communicate to the team? Then we can talk about how we create that content, how we store and deliver that content, and then what's the best screen medium, et cetera, in order to then display that back out to the people that are going to absorb it. So
That's really
I feel like we often work this problem backwards.
It's interesting because there's some parity in there in terms of the CMS world as well, where often we're beginning conversations with customers that are even further down that decision because it's a pre-existing building, or maybe it's not an entire new installation. It's just, and they go, okay, we've got these players that we've decided to go with, and we're going to have screens here, here, and here. What are we going to put on them? And I'm like, we got to go the other way around. First of all, who's talking? Like, who are you communicating to, and who is making the communication? We start at that level, and then
Yep.
break down which departments need to have influence, which don't need to have influence. What's that structure and hierarchy look like? What does your content, your branding look like, and what's the narrative you're trying to deliver there? So, are you kind
Yeah.
of saying from some of these larger installations where potentially they're building new buildings for the first time for whatever project you're being involved with? There's still maybe a little bit of infancy in the AV side where that's not the forefront of thought. It's more building first, structural movement of individuals, and then we layering AV in on top of that. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think many times in AV we respond to RFPs, right? And
Mm,
it's one of the things that I say that our team tries to do is back the truck up a little bit. Let's get back to what the intended outcome was. Let's get
mhm,
back to why the project exists in the first place. Nobody came and said we want to own 400 screens and bright sign players. That's not what the point of the exercise was. The point of
right,
the
sure.
exercise, like you said, was a communication exercise. So why don't we get those people in the room and talk about that? So yeah, we sometimes accept that we're just at the end of a cycle responding to a construction based RFP when, many times you have the opportunity to influence things. We had a hospital project that we did where it was a consultant had come up with a video wall, they'd come up with all this stuff, they just wanted a price. And we responded to the RFP saying, we think you guys are going to end up with an amazing video wall, and you are going to end up realizing that you have no plan to use it. And because of that, we don't feel comfortable responding with a price to a wall,
Mm,
but we would be interested in having a holistic conversation about what you're trying to accomplish.
that's interesting. Yeah.
And we were able to open that door. And then we were able to talk to them about, oh, well, these are displays that people are seeing when a parent is waiting with a sibling while their other siblings going through cancer screening.
Mhm,
And we want some interactive gaming. We want some places where people can forget a little bit, some escapism beyond the emotion. We want some things where as kids are going back and forth between different departments within a hospital in their stay, that they can create a character that follows them down the hall as their friend on the screen as they walk by, and they get some
sure.
choice in who that character is, and the system knows it's them when they walk by, and it's the cute bird that comes with them, not the alligator or whatever that happens
Mhm,
to be. And so there were these initiatives they wanted to do, and so we were able to connect that to an agency. Like, we backed up the truck a little bit. We got an agency involved with us. They were able to do some custom content and actual character creation, et cetera. And then we're actually delivering something interesting. But it all started with backing that conversation up a little bit and not just accepting that our job in this is to sell, zero point 0.9 millimeter LED wall at 150 inches.
mhm,
Um, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with delivering that. If that's your core business, if your core business is just delivery, then that's great. Then you need to have great manufacturer relationships, and you need to be very efficient at delivering labor in order to compete in that market. If you actually want to be influential in AV design and actually make sure that the outcomes are being achieved, then maybe you have to dare to ask for some access to people that you might normally not get access to, different
mm,
stakeholders, right? So I do think that many times it happens. I'll say that the good ones know. There are some integrators that are good at backing that up a little bit and making sure that they're like, hey, my favorite one is like, nobody wants a drill, right?
mm,
They want a hole in the wall. So
I see.
the RFPs for a drill. But what they're
Right.
trying to do is hang a picture, or what they're trying to do is, so whatever that happens to be, like, what are you actually trying to do? Like, you're asking for a tool. What's the project?
Yeah, that
So
makes
backing it up that way. And I'm sure you guys see that too.
Yeah, and I think through my tenure here, because I was originally on the commercial side, so I was talking a lot more to end users with those questions. I think for digital signage at scale, it's the same conversation but different parameters. Um, the experiential piece. A lot of the customers that I typically spoke to were less worried about that. It was more like tactical. We need to deliver X, Y, Z information to someone. This
Yep.
goes along with our security policies or anything like that. Maybe nothing quite as exciting as fish and making an experience for that kind of zoo experience, but I think it all boils down to the same thing as we're saying now. It's just like start off with where you want to end up and then work your way backwards of how, how to deliver that. And it's interesting you mentioned that the kind of the character that comes along with you, because it sounds like they'd already had something in their mind of what they wanted to deliver. And it was
Yeah.
just needed someone to pull and extract that information and then put the technical layer on top of that to say, it's possible. Here's your options and here's how we can achieve that.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're right on the money. I mean, I would like to say though, I think more and more, it's not a nice to have in a corporate environment either, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think in the past we've always like the barbecues on Friday, and
Yeah.
here's the way that we do this new process, or make sure that you're badging in at station 4, or make sure you're releasing rooms, whatever those kind of communications are from a corporate level. But the idea of reconnecting people to mission, the idea of making sure that people are seen and feel part of the larger organization, those are huge opportunities in like our branded environments and our digital signage as well.
Mhm.
Like I was reading, I'm looking down here for a second, but I was reading this piece, 28% more employee retention in branded spaces.
Yeah.
So if you can get 28% more retention and reduce churn in an organization just by reminding people of the greater mission of the organization, why they're there, why they're answering IT tickets at Johnson and Johnson, who make surgical robots who are actually saving people's lives.
Mhm.
Like that connection for an IT person who goes in and actually never sees the machine doing surgery, but reconnecting the fact that what you're doing is actually enabling these people to build these machines that are saving these lives. That creates a deeper level of connection to the business and the core mission, and it makes a difference. And so, how are we using our signage and our touch points not only to just communicate, hey, the barbecue's on Friday,
Mhm.
but to communicate that what you're doing here matters?
I
And
think
no
that's
matter what
interesting.
role you're playing in the organization, like you're making an impact in the world in this way. And that's important, right? Like that's really important. And I think we miss a lot of that. Like we miss some of those moments to connect with people.
It's an interesting parallel that you raised there because you're talking about going and getting this RFP and then saying, let's go back to the beginning, see what you actually want to deliver. And likewise, there's not someone sitting in a support role responding to tickets day on day because they just love responding to tickets. There's another natural driver there. There's a why are you doing this in the first
Yeah.
place? And that kind of runs in parallel with both those thoughts. I think from my experience anyway, I think the industry has grown up very quickly. Obviously, there's lots of things happening, mergers and acquisitions, of which we were just a part of recently, and just kind of rolling up of these things because it's becoming more mainstream. And I actually think COVID might have had a big piece to do with that, trying to get people back into workspaces where you go, there's a reason to come back in. You're not sitting in a
Yeah.
cubicle, you're not sitting in a box. There's a brand experience, there is a loyalty, there is something to entice you to come back in.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to have a real moment here and say I'm distracting myself with this line. So I bet you that other people are too. I'm going to pull my blind for a second if that's
Okay,
okay.
yeah, you go for it.
We'll go the other way so that the sun isn't hitting right across my eyeballs here.
Yeah, no.
I think COVID did accelerate some of that because what's happening is you hear all these little mantras, make it a magnet, not a mandate, earn the
Mm,
commute, return on commute. Like you're hearing all these things about like how do we make people understand that the space is still valuable? How do we earn their drive time back so that they
mm,
come and sit here in our space? All of those kind of things. So we hear a lot of that in as far as what they do, but what we see the result of that are things like 3-day a week mandates, and those aren't the things that motivate people, right?
no,
Like those aren't ways to get people to that's a way to get begrudging compliance, right? That's not
right,
a way to get
100%.
an enthusiastic engaged employee,
Mm,
and the cost of that engagement is huge. And you can do things with technology like track mouse clicks and make sure. But, I'm reminded of Office Space. If you remember the movie from the 90s where he's like, I come in, I sit at my desk, I space out for about an hour. It looks
yeah,
like I'm working, but I'm not. In a day, I probably do an hour of actual work.
mhm,
So he's a butt in a seat. If you're tracking occupancy and utilization, wow, that chair was used 8 hours today. But what was really done there? Did you have an actively engaged, motivated employee sitting in that seat doing their thing? And did you build a space that helps form the environment where that happens? Like
yeah,
putting people in a white box doesn't make that happen. You have to create those moments. And I think we have so many opportunities with the way that we can communicate digitally, the kind of environments we can build, et cetera, to do that in a very cool way. And I think people are just scratching the surface on it, honestly. I've seen some great activations with it. I've seen some ideas that people really loved. And then when the
mm,
price tag came, they couldn't justify an ROI on it. But I think more and more people are seeing that. Like I said, the retention number was big. There's one that said that companies that invest in branded experiences have 21% more market share. They're starting to track some of this data of what the
Mm,
qualitative measures of workplace experience are and how those are actually relating to how companies are performing in the market with regards to their people and their customers. And it's all positive, right? Like it's a net 20-30% range depending on employee retention, customer. We know brand loyalty goes up too, right? So just like your brand loyalty can go up when people connect with your brand, your employee loyalty goes up when they connect with the company they work for.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. It's something that we're seeing more and more on our side as well. And I actually just went down to do a case study yesterday in Canterbury, which is a really nice part of England, to a theatre company called the Marlow Theatre Company. And they've kind of integrated digital signage across their doors, there's data and information which you need, but then there's more experiential stuff down to even some of the more basic stuff where it's like, okay, well, when I'm going to go out of the theater, I can go to the bar. The bar's going to keep showing the play that I was just watching so I don't miss anything. So it's
Yeah.
that entire life cycle of an individual, whether that be corporate comms, retail, QSR. It's touch points. It's not the narrative. It's just the media that's delivering it to make it more immersive.
I saw your post on LinkedIn too, a full project.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw
There's
you
more to
put a
come on that
picture
one,
up.
but do you see the picture of the guy dressed up as a seagull eating chips?
Yes.
Yeah, you can go check out my LinkedIn to have a look at that picture. But yeah, that was just another day in Canterbury, I guess. But it's for my
There you
first
go.
time there, so I'm assuming he's just a regular.
Yeah, we have a guy like that in Laguna called the greeter. There was, I guess, in the early days of California, a gentleman who used to walk the streets there and wave to everybody in like a red shirt and a cowboy hat or something. And so some local has adopted that as his persona, and you'll see him running around town in the outfit and greeting people on the streets.
See, that's experiential. You're going to go down there and you will never forget it.
100%. Yeah, that's true.
Perfect. I've got one more question for you, Mark, before I let you go here,
Sure.
which is one that I'm asking everyone at the moment, and it's just around AI. And I know that it's almost like a cop out to drop the question in there on AI, but I do think it's interesting to understand like where people think it's going. Do you feel like AI affecting the AV industry now, and at what level, and what do you think that'll look like in, I don't know, a year, 2 years time?
I think it's definitely affecting the AV industry now. I think there are efficiencies that can be had by using AI. I was on a panel at Infocom with a bunch of people talking about AI in their business. The one that stood out to me the most was just the integration of agents that a company was doing just for things like service calls.
Yep.
So, when you go into a building, it's connected to the CRM data. It knows every call that's been made. The technician's notes from the last calls automatically come up. It goes, hey, you're going into room 204. It's had 3 issues. Last 2 times it was the power cycle on the amplifier. You may check that first. If not, here's some tips from Bob, one of our senior installers,
Mhm.
on rooms like this, blah, 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 blah. And that's happening real time on their phone as they're walking into a job site, right? So just being able to connect things like all the user manuals, create an FAQ, take work tickets and resolutions, put those
Mhm.
into the space, put the CRM into the space, and connect all those through agents and make this kind of like real rich database of information. So I think from an installation service and even proactive service monitoring maintenance part, I think AI, the data that AI is collecting, we know the problem with data has been that it's just too much and we don't know how to parse and sort it. And so I think AI is making that portion a lot easier. So we've had these monitoring systems, we've had ways to get this pane of glass and get this data for a long time. AI is fixing
Mhm.
that. I think from a content creation perspective, obviously AI is aiding in some of that content creation or being able to do things like ambient soundscapes or being able to do things like generated content for screens, or if it's a wellness space, being able to use some AI generated art that makes it evergreen, and then being able to kind of intersperse that with your corporate messaging and things like that on a randomized schedule that's not water torture for the most part,
Mhm.
dripping in somebody's eyes in the back as they're sitting through their day. You don't want the red screen coming up every 10 seconds while they're at their
Right.
desk, right?
Yeah.
So those type of things I think are already happening, and I think we'll continue to see that. The idea of hyper personalization, I think, is really good. I think the ability to meet people with messaging that actually fits them personally is great, depending on the privacy and all of those things. We have to make sure that we're ethically using those pieces. And then for us, even using things like HeyGen or some of those tools to create company avatars, create training videos, write scripts, onboard people in a more personal way. So from an AV business perspective, I think there's a lot of things that we're doing in those spaces. I will say that, I think I want to say this gently, but I think that there's still a great place for art, for physical artifacts, for things that I don't think AI is going to impact as quickly, like pieces of history, like going to the King Tut exhibit and seeing pieces of history that are thousands of years old.
Yeah.
You can augment some of that with content. Maybe AI will speed some of that up, or maybe AI will connect that to more audiences that are interested in it. But I think there's a lot of value in the physical. And I think there's this pending kind of piece. I was looking at a article later, and I know everybody's talking about power and everything else, but we could potentially max out the grid in the United States in the next 5 years,
Yeah.
just based on a new data center need for driving AI queries, et cetera. Right. So I think at some point, it's not going to be AI for everything. It's going to be, where does AI make the most sense?
Hmm.
And where are we using it the most responsibly, so we're not having a negative impact on sustainability, environment, et cetera,
Right.
when we're using those things. Like, anyway, it's a weird conversation. I love the conversation. Actually, it's probably be a whole show, right?
Oh, easily.
What did we think about AI?
Mhm.
But I do think it's making some positive waves in AV. I think it's making content easier, more approachable, and more personal. I
Yeah.
think those are all great things for our industry.
I think anything that can give you an opportunity to say, "Look, I'm not 100% confident in this particular area, but I need it. I need it as a stopgap to get to where I want to get delivered." It's always good to have in your pocket and say, "Maybe I really want to release a podcast show or something, but I'm not great at Photoshop." So maybe then AI can come in and assist with that piece and kind of fill in the gaps. But there's what's happening today, and who knows what this will look like in 3 years' time, let alone 3 months' time. But I just want to make sure that there's always a human at the beginning and a human at the end of that experience. So whether AI can
Yeah.
assist in the middle. We just use the humans either end to validate because it's not bulletproof yet, and
Yeah.
a human to start off the creative side of it. Then you can kind of just utilize it within that workflow. So you've got reins either side.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that's interesting is the qualitative data that we can get out of AI. So if you and
Mm,
I are having this conversation and I start to look down at my desk all the time, AI might say that I was disengaged at minute 25 through 28. And now all of a sudden, we're not just getting quantitative. 15 people saw my screen,
mhm.
but 6 people smiled when they saw the screen. Like, what are those qualitative measures? And I think we're seeing AI being able to do that through facial recognition, camera tracking, et cetera.
For
I
sure.
think some people have privacy concerns with that, which I completely understand. I think the other part of that, though, is that there are other ways that you can collect that data. So I was at a SEGD X Lab last year in New York,
Mm.
and there was a way that you could anonymously volunteer your Apple Watch data. And they were actually doing sentiment tracking based on biomarkers
Wow, that's interesting.
accumulated from the Apple Watches in the room. So they know when people started to get antsy. They know when people, at 18 minutes in, most of the presentations, people were about ready for a break, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. So maybe we stage our content where we don't do anything more than 20 minutes and we keep audience engagement. Maybe we schedule
Imagine.
our breaks a little different.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had that set up so you just had all that kind of anonymous data and they say, well, if the average heart rate of the entire audience goes below a certain number, we just end the show right there and then. We've gone too far. Let's just red light everything and everyone goes get some lunch and goes for a run around. That's
Yeah.
really interesting how it could be. The thing that I always hark back to that I feel like we're getting closer and closer to, and might in 10 years' time, people will look back at it and go, wow, it was really close, is Minority Report. The more I kind of think back to their expectation of people's kind of Blade Runner did a lot of similar stuff where it's like everyone's experiencing the world slightly differently with a different digital lens on top of everything. And
Yeah.
that's mainly AI driven. And you say like kind of understanding the individual and whether we'll allow that to happen and we'll give enough away. But we do all the time. We go and click yes onto cookies onto a website. We go and
I-
utilize Facebook tools or whatever. So we're already in the habit of saying yes to these long 25-page long agreements where we're not read through the whole thing. So it's in our
yeah.
nature to do that.
Yeah, I think I have a friend who went from AV into law,
Ah,
and he's been trying to do some law around governance and things like that. And he always jokes, the two most dangerous words in tech are "I agree," because we all
right.
click "I agree" to get the app, but we
Yeah,
didn't read the
100%.
25-page end user license agreement. Nobody read
Yeah.
that, so
Because
you
what are you
don't know
going to
what
do?
you're.
Not have shorts or reels?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
not
come on,
the option. It's
come on,
this.
you can't, you can't.
They've got you. They've got you. You really want to scroll a reel, so you will say you agree.
Exactly, and now, like you said, now it's accept all.
Yeah.
Like when the website comes up and you have to accept or deny cookies, you just click accept all and you move on your way.
Well,
Absorb your content and
interestingly, here in Europe, what was here in Europe, they have GDPR
hmm,
agreements you have to accept every time you go onto the website. And you probably see that over in the US as well on occasion. I saw one the other day that I think it was The Sun, where the choice was yes, I accept cookies, or no, I will pay for a non cookied version of this experience. And those are your
oh,
two options. So we either said yes to accepting cookies, or I'm happy to pay you a small subsidiary fee just to access it without being tracked. which is an interesting way of approaching it. But it could be data is important to people. It could well be the way things go. If that works out, it could be an interesting first blood in the water.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a brave new world, and I think we're navigating it well. But the Minority Report thing is always fun because I revisit that all the time, and all the tech that's in there is pretty much here, other than the sonic boom shotgun.
Yeah,
But
the
you know
future
the
telling people, but oh, maybe one day.
yeah, the future telling people maybe not, but the triplets, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
But the driving cars, I've been in a Waymo and I've
yeah.
been pushed around in a car without a driver.
Hmm.
The the screen is all but there. I mean, micro LED and gesture control and all that stuff. Like that's not even a big deal anymore.
No.
And then, like you said, the hyper personalized signage as he's walking by a store,
Hmm.
knows who he is, adjusts the ads. We've had that for a long time too, right? The audience intelligence software and all that stuff. I mean, that started coming out from Intel in the 2008,
Yeah,
9. Like it's 17 years old, and now it's getting better with AI, et cetera. But those concepts and those pieces of software have been around a long time. So
100%. Mark, so I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me.
yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. This is really cool. I love exploring our AV world from all these different angles, and I think signage is one of those things that many times gets boiled down to something like you said, very simple. I just need a player and a screen,
Hmm.
but it really has the opportunity to be much more than that and have much more impact. So I love thinking about it from an experiential lens and how we connect the dots on all those things.
100%. Hopefully, we can have you back on another time and we'll deep dive into AI and go into a whole other gamut of things.
Perfect. Sounds great. Hey, thanks for having me, Tim.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much for watching. We are trying to create a community of individuals that are looking for different ways of learning in digital. Be a way to get people involved in digital signage and understanding the AV industry as a whole. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, you can learn a little bit more at signagelive.com. We will see you again on the next one.